I am talking to Jackie Young today. Welcome, Jackie. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. Now, rather than me uh, telling people who Jackie Young is, you know yourself better. So tell us, who is Jackie Young?
Well, Jackie Young started as Jona Spiegel, born on the 18th of the 12th, 1941, in Vienna, Austria, and at the grand old age of 9 months old, found in an orphanage, sent by the Gestapo to Theresienstadt, or Terezin in Czech, stayed there for 2 years, 8 months, and liberated by the Russians. Few months later, few weeks later, probably, I was flown over with seven, 800 other children. I was one of the youngest ones. There was about six of the very young ones, and we went to the Windermere area, which is the north part of England, stayed there a few weeks, and then went to another place in Sussex where just only the young ones were. We were nearly four, and we stayed there for a year where we learnt how to speak English and forgot our German and our Czech, and then subsequently went to another place to be looked after at the where the older teenagers were. Stayed there for a few months, and then was picked up by these two people who eventually became my adopted parents. They looked after me till I was nine, and officially adopted at 9 years old. And well, basically, I just grew up as a North London Jewish kid and didn't know zip about my past at all. Nothing was at all revealed to me. My parents were very loving, but just couldn't handle telling me. They were just scared that, I don't know, maybe they thought I might run away or
Yeah.
something. Then a boy. There was three major things that actually brought my past to me. Was when a boy came up to me in my second school and said, about 9 years old, and he said, "You know, Jackie, you're adopted." Which, in which turn, I went to my mum and dad later on and told them the good news, and they eventually come clean. Yes, you're adopted, but that's as far as it went. And then, and the second time, my adopted grandmother said, "I don't know if you know, Jackie, but you're not English, you're Austrian." And she was in her 90s then, and I figured she may be a bit doolally. I couldn't believe what she was talking about.
Yeah.
And the final thing was when I was just about to get married, I had to prove that I was Jewish to get married in a proper synagogue, and that's when my mother had to produce the papers that came with me to show that my mother was Jewish from Vienna, and that I snatched them away, and that's when I found out the past of my stay in Theresienstadt.
Okay. And the family that adopted you, I assume, is the Young family. That's whose name you have
Well,
now.
they started off as the Janowski family,
Okay.
and then subsequently, when I was I don't know, in my teens, they said we're changing to Young. So from being Jona Spiegel in Austria, I became Jackie Young in the UK.
That's quite some transition. Now, but do you don't have any recollection of your time in Theresienstadt at all? You were still a toddler when you left there.
Absolutely too young. My past came to me in my dreams when I was with my parents. I would ask them. I can remember a big swing, and and they say, "No, you don't know anything." But it turns out, in the first place, we were where a swing usually has only about 2 meters high. This was about 4 or 5 meters high, the actual poles. So it was and I used to dream that the chains used to go up to the sky.
Yeah,
And on the second time, I dreamt about my second place that I stayed after a year, which was called Weir Courtney. And I used to remember these pointed trees and a terraced garden and going down to a racing track. And it was as clear as day in my dreams. And I used to say to my adoptive parents, does this ring a bell to you, or was I in a place? And they said, they just sort of fluffed it off and just didn't. They were very, very loving parents, but very scared to tell me anything about my past.
Okay, and how did they react when you asked them about your adoption history and how, if you were
Well,
adopted?
they were obviously a bit insecure. That's what I would like to say. They were insecure, worried maybe that I might decide that's it, I'm going to go and find my real parents or something, not realizing that, well, they were told with the papers that my parents and that were murdered in a place called Maly Trostinec in just outside Minsk in
Oh,
Belarus.
okay, and this was, of course, during the Holocaust, I assume. Yeah. So did you? Uh, okay. Then the other question is, how was your reaction that you when you found out that your parents were murdered? Your biological parents were murdered in such a brutal way.
Well, to be truthful, I don't know. I must have been living the dream. As I said, my parents were extremely loving and doting parents, so I didn't felt that I'd actually lost too much. You know, there were people that just were known as your parents, but that's all. And it was only really until I got married and had my own children that I realized how important your birth parents are. Yes,
Yeah.
and and well, subsequently, I only just found out last year who my father and his name was. So, you know, but over the years that I've found out, I've been searching every part of my history to find out the full story of it.
Okay. And so how would you probably might not be the right question to ask, but how did you adapt to life in Britain? But of course, you were a toddler, so it probably came very natural to you, I suppose.
Yeah, I was just an ordinary North London kid
Yeah,
growing
yeah.
up. Went to synagogues, went to clubs, and it was actually a club that I saw this very attractive young lady who I thought, oh, she's never going to want to know me. But I went out again with a guy, and it turned out that this guy's sister was this beautiful girl down the club.
Okay, so
So
that's
the rest is history. I've been married over 60 years to the same
well,
girl.
very good. That's destiny, I suppose you would call that. Now,
Absolutely.
and you said you only found out last year your biological father real name.
Yes.
Did you ever go back to visit any of the places like Theresienstadt or even Vienna, or sorry, Austria, where you were born?
Yes. Well, I tell you, first went to a big major Holocaust reunion in Israel, where I was hoping to find somebody or some connection, which unfortunately didn't happen. The following year, I said to my wife Lita, I said, "Come on, we're going to go and visit Theresienstadt." And that's what we did. We went in '82 to Theresienstadt, looked around this garrison town. I don't know if you know what it is, and could not believe that I survived 2 years, 8 months there. Funny enough, I have to tell you that when we got to Theresienstadt, there was a man with a little office where you had to pay to get into the show or be shown around. And I said, I have to tell you that last time I got here for nothing.
It's good to know you kept your sense of humor anyhow. But in that time, of course, in 1981, the Czech it would still be Czechoslovakia, that would still be under a communist rule. How easy or how difficult was it to get there from the UK?
Well, apparently the British were asked if they could allow these children. It was asked for 1,000 children, but I think only about 700 were allowed in. And we stayed in this castle just outside Prague for recuperating after Terezin, and then we were flown by these 10 bombers, not proper planes, bomber planes. So there was no windows or anything, and we apparently were told that we were sitting on the floor of the plane, and we were the last. Us, the youngest ones, were flown the last plane into an area called Windermere, which is in the Lake District of the UK, and again, I have no recollection, and I think about now. I want to show you a picture. This is me. You can see it clearly, and
Yeah.
these are the pilots. And as you can see, I looked like I was having a good time.
Yeah, you look happy, anyhow.
I sure do, don't I? And believe it or not, I only saw this photo about 4 or 5 years ago. Somebody had been looking for me from the Windermere area who had these photos, and that's when he sent them to me. And I show you another thing.
Sure.
This is the transport of me, Jona Spiegel, going to Terezin. 1236 was my number.
From Vienna, yeah. But it must have been quite something. Well, you said you don't recall much, but even getting into UK without any language skills, not even knowing the language. But because I know the Windermere stories. People, the children were treated quite well, and they were taught English and stuff like that. So, but you have no recollection of that whatsoever, or?
No, my memories came to me at this first place where the 6 youngest, and I'm going to show you another photo of the 5 youngest here. This is me at the head of the table with the curly hair. As you can see, I haven't changed. And this is the place where they basically had to give us food with sugar on. Apparently we wouldn't eat anything without sugar on it. We were very, and I have to tell you that from the experience I've heard from these people that looked after us, 2 German ladies, nurses, they said one would have been a nightmare. 6 of us was 6 times worse.
Yeah, and also these are German ladies. That were they hired by the British government, or were they German Jewish ladies?
They were German Jewish ladies that brought here. They were actually nurses back in Germany.
Yeah.
And once the British allowed the German Jews and Austrian Jews to come away from, some were transported to the Isle of Man for a little while, just to make sure that they weren't enemy, dangerous people. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're the ones that basically put up with our nonsense, because obviously our background was extremely, difficult, not normal. So they had to put up with, us screaming, excuse me, screaming at night and what have you. Obviously we did suffer by our background. Subsequently, we were told that when we were in Theresienstadt as babies, we looked after each other. We apparently had no toys. The nurses at the Theresienstadt didn't have any time to play with us, and they basically, we were fed and cleaned, and that's it. With all the troubles that went on in Theresienstadt.
Yeah, well, I've heard some people refer to Theresienstadt as the good concentration camp, but there was no such thing as a good concentration camp. They all had just one purpose, really. So yeah, it's amazing that actually this even survived those 2 years there as a small baby, because generally they would be the first to. Well, yes. It sounds horrible to get rid of in a way. So yeah,
that's what it was. I mean, it really have to put it down to the nurses and the doctors in this baby ward that we were in to actually, they're the reason for whatever reason, we survived. And plus, I always thought that we were part, as you know, it was a propaganda camp as well as a holding camp for
Yeah,
Auschwitz. So I believe it was part of the charade or the propaganda that when the Red Cross did come there, they probably said, if we're not killing people, because look, we got babies here.
yeah.
So, and I think that was the whole thing, that it was a real charade on a total lie. And people have suggested to me that Terezin was a good camp, like you said, but 33,000 people died in that
Yeah,
camp.
yeah. I mean,
Very thing.
yeah. There was no such thing as a good concentration. There were bad ones and worse ones than that. That's what it was. But yeah, Theresienstadt, of course, the Nazis shot the film there. I think it was also called Theresienstadt as a sign, as propaganda tool, saying, "Look, this is how we treat our Jewish citizens."
Yeah.
So yeah. And of course, the Red Cross was completely duped by them. They believed everything they were shown. But have you ever been in contact again with any of, say, the nurses or doctors in Theresienstadt afterwards?
No, unfortunately, that is one of the things I would have loved to have been able to. Apparently, there was a head nurse called Martha Venker, who after the war went to Australia. She was still alive quite late on, but I sadly found out she died before I could even think of contacting her. She was she would have been the major source of information about the place. I did meet the two nurses that looked up, the two German ones I was talking about
Yeah.
in Bundesland, who looked after us for a year. And that I used to talk to them, but they were already in their 90s, and let's say they were a little bit past their sell-by date.
Yeah. But still have a nice bit of that connection. But did you have any other family members aside from your parents? Did you have any siblings that either lived or were murdered during the Holocaust?
I have to tell you now, I've subsequently found, because I did a DNA test, that my father had apparently been married before to another woman, and she sadly went with her son, Wilhelm Kornfein, who is my father, he was Adolf Kornfein, and they both went to Auschwitz and sadly were murdered. Both my parents, see, my father apparently met up with my mother. He was about 15, 16 years older than my mother. She gave birth when she was in her 30s, 32, to me. And so I did actually lose a half brother by, sadly. And how and why my mother got together to have, I mean, obviously things were terrible in Vienna, and I popped out 2 years into the war in Vienna. You just can't, it just proves it's amazing how the whole thing, how I'm here today.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, because yeah, but I've heard other amazing stories of children being born in Bergen-Belsen and survived. So but
They were, but may I say, these people
sure.
born in Bergen-Belsen probably was only a few weeks before they was liberated.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, all of this, it's the Holocaust. We all know was the most awful thing in history, the darkest era in history. But it's good to realize there are some light points there as well, some kind of green shoot, so to speak. And your story is one of them, and it's good to acknowledge that as well. But yeah, I've read a small bit of your story as well, and it's only afterwards when you found out. You always assumed you was just a British, a London fellow. How did you find out that you wasn't exactly, you were slightly different than your peers, so to speak?
primarily through those adoption information, being Austrian, and then by the papers that with my mother had held in, believe it or not, she held it in a safe deposit, the papers. And I was going to show you one last photo of us kids, and this may be, can you see it?
Yeah, I can see you again there with curly hair.
I'm the curly-headed kid in the middle
Yeah.
there. And, you know, like I say, it's like what can I say? It turns your whole life. You're living in a certain thing, and then you're like on a train one way, and then you get on a train another way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Bit of like a roller coaster in a way.
It's a completely, it's you know, it can blow you away. And thankfully, I married this lovely girl who has helped me, shared my past all the way. And in fact, she's the one that actually coaxed me to write down my experiences while I can remember them. And so that's how. Did you read the Lost and Waiting to Be Found thing?
I have, yeah, yeah. So that's
She was the instrument that actually got me to write it down while I could remember it as fresh as I could. So basically, that's my history, basically.
yeah, and it's a very interesting history now. So just all the bits of your life. I understand you also worked as a cabbie, or do you still work as a cabbie?
Well, I retired as a taxi driver 15 years ago,
Yeah.
but I didn't start out as a taxi driver. Believe it or not, I started out as a ladies' hairdresser. I did
Okay.
a 3-year apprenticeship, had clients and all the things. And my wife hasn't been to a hairdresser in over 50 years. I've used to cut I've got 2 daughters, 3 grandchildren, and I used to cut their hair and what have you. So and then to around 21, I said, because I got dermatitis, a skin complaint on my
Yeah.
fingers, I had to pack it in, and that's when I learnt what's called the knowledge of London to be a cab driver, and worked it for 46 years.
Okay. So you must have heard quite a few stories in the cab as well, I suppose.
Again, I'm very lucky to be here because I
Yeah.
had somebody in my taxi who was talking a bit nasty. A gun fell out of his top pocket, and
Okay.
he asked me, did I see what he had? I said, it looked like a heavy lighter, I said to him, a cigarette lighter. So he said, oh, okay. So we went, I had him for nearly an hour around London. I let him out. And then I told my wife that, and then I said, she told me there's a taxi driver has been shot dead. I said, you must be joking. She said, yeah. So I phoned the police, told them the story. Subsequently, they caught him, identified him, went to the Old Bailey, and he went to prison.
Okay. So I mean, you escaped you escaped being murdered once again, I suppose. So yeah,
Absolutely, very sad for the other taxi driver.
yeah,
And I think it's just clear luck.
yeah.
Nothing.
But yeah, I think it's also a testament to your adoptive parents that that you're still so positive, because I've spoken to other survivors, or yeah, and even children of survivors. And sometimes they have a different experience because their parents survived and they were very strict and everything, and they were kind of, and with good reason, of course, they were still traumatized by what they had experienced, and that trauma was pushed onto them. So I
Yeah.
think that it's good you didn't have that. So I think that's one of
I
the
was
reasons
very
why.
fortunate. Yeah, I was very fortunate to get adopted by 2, dare I say, very loving, caring Jewish parents who adored me.
Yeah, and that's good to know. Now, Jackie, it was a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm
Pleasure
sure
to
at
talk
some
to you.
yeah, no worries. I'm sure at some stage we'll chat again.
Okay.
So yeah, and as I said, I will post this on my blog as well. So and again, thanks for doing the interview.
Will you be able to send me the YouTube?
Of course, I will.
Okay. Lovely talking. It's lovely seeing you, and we'll keep in touch. Yes.
We will.
Okay.